When I got my first hard drive, it was 6 gigs, and everybody I know at the time, who are all computer people as well, were like, oh my god, how are you ever gonna fill 6 gigs? It's gonna take forever, that's so much! Yeah, I was using 16 gigs of RAM the other day. Hey Board, hey DJ, hey Pseudo, happy weekend everybody, how's it going?
Hello.
Oh,
it's good. I've done school now. I've freedom. I can sleep and do fun things again.
So mute in scene isn't actually working.
Am I muted?
No, you're doubled, actually.
Is 2 with me such a bad thing?
No. Try now. Well, that muted both of them. That's just scenes. Okay.
Beta test.
Do I have to come in here and do this? So yeah, OBS Ninja did a big update and changed everything on me. And when I went to run the stream today, I was like, oh, everything's different. This is gonna be fun.
Yeah. Updates are nice for new stuff, but then also it just, now you got to relearn everything again, depending on how much have changed, and shit's probably broken. So now you got to deal with that.
All right. Well, I think I fixed it by just relying on you in scene. Say again, talk again.
Hello, look at me, I'm talking.
You're like super low though.
It's because I leaned back. I should be fine now.
And it's coming in on the wrong channel now because I'm relying on the scene. But whatever. We're gonna run with it.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And we'll fix it later. We'll fix it later. So, I don't see any responses. How's everyone's weekend? It's not the most popular game we're talking about first. It might not draw the most numbers, but it was pretty fun. Hey, Pookie. Nice to see you. Welcome. How's your weekend?
Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, this game is kind of one of those hidden gems where I don't see too many people talking about it, but the people who have played it, I usually quite enjoy it.
It was not really what I expected. It was a little simpler on some mechanics than I expected. But that really just allows you to focus on the parts of the game that are more action and fun oriented. And really, if you were so focused on the base building side of it and that was really intense, then the multiplayer would probably slow down. It would turn into more of a survival crafting Valheim idea, which is kind of what I expected when I got into it.
Yeah, it's most definitely just kind of like the original one. Was like a $20 indie game. I remember, maybe $30. And it was very short in scope, very kind of similar thing where you just kind of have, I think that one you started with one character, but everyone else was typically kind of randomly assigned for your playthrough. And it was a lot more simpler kind of base building. It was very straightforward, but it was mostly just focusing on, driving around, finding survivors or finding supplies and managing supplies and that kind of stuff. And it was very simple in its approach, and it's very simple in scope, but it, was a decently polished experience and kind of got a fan following. And the one thing everybody wanted was co-op, because I believe the first one didn't have co-op. They released some DLCs for different game modes, but everyone wanted co-op. The second one came out, it got picked up by Microsoft, and they added co-op. And they kept the kind of same idea of, it's fairly straightforward. We're not going for anything too revolutionary here, but people kind of just wanted a nice, simple co-op zombie game that they could play without having to worry about too much, effort or time. You can kind of just play it casually. It's definitely a nice kind of more casual sided game towards a more of a niche market, but it hits its mark well.
Yeah, I mean, I went in, like I said, expecting survival crafting kind of, more hardcore Valheim type level stuff, and what I got was multiplayer just cause zombies.
Yep.
Which I was totally okay with.
because like a lot of games in that genre, especially for zombies, they always have everyone always goes for that kind of like hyper realism, hardcore, brutal. You're gonna have to research a spreadsheet of items. You're gonna have to learn weapon mechanics that are all weird. You're gonna have to, you're gonna be starving all the time, and someone's just gonna be killing you. And it's like, some people who like zombies and stuff, they don't always want to deal with that stuff. They kind of just want a nice light sim where you just drive around killing zombies. There are some threats to it, but the game isn't punishing you all the way. It's more of, you can actually relax when playing it and try to have some fun. But a lot of these other games you'll play and you're like, man, I've been stressed for 2 hours. Like, why am I doing this? Games are supposed to be fun, freaking out because everyone's gonna die and my guy's bleeding and I don't have food or water or medical supplies. I'm like, man, I gotta worry about that stuff in real life. I don't want to have to worry about that in a game as well.
This is true. This is true. That does happen. And I do kind of like those games still. But like you said, it's nice to not.
Yeah,
just
nice to
not.
Have the variety and the choice, and it's nice to see people do things different and that there is a market for both. And like I still play those other games, I enjoy the hell out of them, but State of Decay kind of just fits in its own little bubble. Yeah,
I agree. Show of hands if anybody has actually played State of Decay 2 in the chat. We'll start with world building. And this is another one of those examples of games that just sort of lean entirely on foreknowledge for world building.
Yeah, this one is especially with being a sequel, it's quite relies a bit on the first one. There's other game modes that go a bit more into kind of what the world is because they're on either different maps or the previous map, but the way the game's played is also just a bit different too, because it's like it kind of has a roguelike element where at least with the first one as well, is when you kind of when you clear or complete the game, you have the option of leaving, which then kind of just restarts the world but on a higher difficulty. And you keep kind of going through it. So the world building kind of had to be a bit more simplistic to kind of accommodate it. Otherwise it's not going to make sense that you keep coming back, but they could have, doesn't mean to say it's not impossible, but I do understand at least at some level why they kept it kind of simple of here's the world, but they really don't really provide you any kind of backstory to what's going on, not really anything to the town. I can't really remember anything about it, rather than it's just kind of your typical suburban town, kind of a countryside town. There's not really nothing landmark, not really any kind of history, especially in the first kind of bit of a playthrough. And it would have been kind of nice to have a bit more personality, maybe a bit more things. You can, doesn't always have to be super in depth, but even if there's just like the locations that are there, like you can have a certain shop that has some personality to it, or like a burger joint that has a fun name, or because the game already has that kind of light-hearted humor, you can kind of tap into that and add some more branding or add some more memorable stuff to the place. A lot of the locations don't really stand out. There's not really too much of like neighborhoods that you could really identify either. When you're kind of driving around, it is kind of feels like the same. There's just kind of houses and then shops kind of scattered. It might also have been nice to have like a city or like a more of a dense town. There is kind of like,
it kind of sounds like what you want is to just smear a bit of Black Isle into it.
Yeah, it's just some map, or like just what it's one of those things where it kind of just feels like an open world game, but then the world you're in is even more open than most open world games. There's not always a whole lot going on. A lot of it's kind of RNG for like other civilizations, but for the world itself, it doesn't really feel like there's much there outside of what is RNG. There's nothing at that kind of base, and I still enjoyed the actual map layout. It feels a bit sporadic. It's not too big where it's kind of a pain to drive to one end to the other one, and it's not too small where you just feel like just not really much there. But at the same time, like I would have liked that feel of crossing somewhere, now you kind of recognize or where you are. If someone's to kind of show me a screenshot, it'd be kind of hard for me to tell which part of the map I'm in, or if there's even identifiable places. There are ones that are okay, well, there's an area where it's more forested and there's camping, there's a place where it's been logged, and there is kind of like a smaller, more city-like thing, but nothing that's really gonna really stand out and be like wow, or have anything kind of like that. That's just one thing I've liked better from the map, is to be a bit more diverse, maybe a bit more depth to it, especially some kind of backstory or some sort of lore that you can find around.
Recreating suburban hell, not necessarily the best setting for a game.
Yeah, and even if it was, would have been nice to have a bit more in there. Like, it's nice that you can enter in most of the houses and most of that stuff, but like without there being much personality, without there really being anything there, it's hard to you know, really feel like it's any different. And you can kind of notice when the houses have been reused, it's kind of the same thing again there. Nothing else is there.
Yeah, it does hinder the replayability pretty quickly, because pretty soon you're just like, hey, it's that house again. Hey, it's that house again. Hey, it's that house again. But I find the core game loop is fun enough that it doesn't matter if you're visiting the same house again, as long as there's more zombies to shoot in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I do like how they kept the bases pretty, or the actual settlements are pretty, have a lot of variety to them. I don't know why you would choose some of them if for whatever reason, because it kind of just seems like there's always like the best one to do. It might have been nice to have like I said, like this may have been something that's further down the line in the RNG, maybe in a higher difficulty or maybe a different mode, but it's stuff that, you know, might have been nice having the default too. Is when that RNG happens, you know, maybe certain locations on the map are more infested than others. You know, maybe some are a bit more dangerous, and maybe that's why you didn't choose a certain location, because, you know, it's just dangerous there until things get cleared out. So you don't want to just put your base there. But the current limitation is kind of just the amount of people you have. But there's some locations that have the same people requirement, but one is just like 10 times better than the other one. And it would have been nice to kind of have a reason to that, because that kind of just feels like I don't know why I would ever pick that other location. Like when we looked up north, it just doesn't seem, you know, ever to be kind of worth it, where it might be nice for sometimes, you know, oh, I want the better one, but it's, you know, there's a other limitation to it. I need to clear something else. I have to take this one for now, but now I have something to work towards, you know, another goal that kind of extends the playability of the session.
Even just buffing some of them so that they're comparable, so that if none of them are open, which one you choose is really more down to maybe a bit of play style rather than which one is better.
Yeah, that'd be good too. Because some of the ones I've seen, there was that warehouse one that didn't really seem like it provided too much. Maybe it gives you more storage or something, but the one we're in right now, you know, kind of gives us an auto mechanic slot and a bunch of that kind of useful stuff. Might have been nice to have one that's like, you know, a gun store, or there's some other ones that are further south, but they require more people. But yeah, I guess from what we've seen, and, you know, quite a decent amount of playing, from what I've seen, probably in like 20 or 25 hour playthrough, there hasn't been anything that's like too diverse and crazy, rather than you can kind of notice a linear progression of how you want to go.
A good way to balance them would have been the spawns of caches of items and resources around them. So maybe if you do want to have that better base that's always better to work out of, less stuff spawns around it. It's more out of the way, you know, it's more secure, but every single run you have to do for items, then you got to go farther, which is more time, which is using more resources while you go to get it. And it's actually a really good way to balance the base from there.
And as well as like danger too, if there's like a lot of slots or a lot of cool stuff with it, but maybe it's, you know, some of them are kind of in the heart of a town, but like the one that we have, it's pretty central in an area. It doesn't really seem like it's that much more dangerous.
Yeah, well, the way it's laid out too, it's super defensible, right? Like it's all fences, and the one spot they do have to come up on, people have a sniper tower off of it, and then the front of our base is just a narrow entryway they have to come in. You can just kill them all as little kill funnel zone. So there's you don't even have to think about defense.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're at an okay for the world building.
Yep. Yeah. There's definitely quite a bit that could be added, but, you know, it's one of the things, again, it's a kind of more of a casual indie side of games. I understand that, you know, the way it was done, I would prefer it done that way than them try to do something a bit more in depth, but then have it be bad. Yeah. If it was like a low quality, you know, that would detract from it. The way it is right now, it's, you know, it serves, it doesn't detract from the experience. And I'd much rather that than, you know, something more in depth. So I still appreciate, you know, the decisions that were made. They're definitely very, it was purposeful, at least. They didn't just accidentally forget to build out the world.
Yeah, no,
it gets a bit complicated.
They approached it as, this isn't a story game. We'll keep it simple here. We'll focus our attention and our money on the areas that matter. And they made a really good core game loop and a fun core experience, and then just had enough world so that you're in a world. And they did do that. You're in a world. It makes sense. It looks like a proper suburban area. Nothing's out of place. Nothing's wrong in that suburban setting. It's just bland. But Suburbia is bland. And it allowed them to recreate it over and over again. So I think they did a good job for their scope.
Yeah, and a big thing you put up there is that it's, you know, it's emergent gameplay and emergent stories. Since it is replayability and you're supposed to be kind of be doing the same thing over, is that you as the player are supposed to be kind of figuring out, you know, the story, what's going on. Your characters are kind of provided to you. The conflicts that are happening are kind of, you know, randomized and provide you get to kind of choose what happens. So it's mostly up to it's a bit more of that sandbox feel. And you can't really give sandbox games too much of a story. You kind of just have to let the player play. You kind of just give them that world, sometimes give a bit of backstory, a little bit of something that's going on, but for the most part, the whole point of these kind of games is just, the players are going to play. They're going to figure out their own thing. They can, if there's some gaps in there's nothing really stopping the player from inserting their own kind of little story or inserting from their own imagination kind of what they think things happen to kind of, enhance their experience that way. It's kind of a nice little tool to use, but it's definitely not for everyone. Some people, prefer not to have to do the work of implementing a story in their head themselves, or they have hard times, believing it if it wasn't directly told from a dev. But it's a nice tool for people who really enjoy that sandbox experience.
You know who I'm sure would write a very, very good story? The people who made Rimworld. Because they made an AI that writes stories, and they did it well. Like, really well. Crazy.
It's also amazing, like, how many books and movies and just how many stories have just come out of D&D sessions, and people who would play D&Ds in the 70s, 80s, and just kept track of their character and their campaigns and stuff like that. And emergent gameplay can actually result in very interesting stories.
Were you thinking of the new Blizzard game or the new guy from Blizzard game coming? When you said that, did you see that in the news?
I did see that. I wasn't thinking about that, but yeah, that's a good point too. I was thinking of like Drizzt and stuff like that. I can't remember how many books are in that series.
Drizzt.
It's one of those things where for people who play D&D, they understand what we're talking about. Like, they kind of just have a world that gets provided. There is backstory, but the actual lore and stuff that happens is, emergent dependent on what the characters do. So it kind of has to be very on the fly, or things are resultant of, kind of just crazy antics that people get up to. And it's very organic that way. So you get, very unique ideas coming out of things because it's just spur of the moment stuff that happens.
Yep. I have a few different characters that I use in most of my stories that I made while I was doing pen and paper back in the day, and that's how their personalities were developed, and they're deep and meaningful and interesting characters now due to years of development.
It's amazing kind of how, like, when you start a new character, you kind of just have that empty canvas of a personality. You kind of have an idea in your head how you want them to be, but it really comes down to what happens in your campaign and what happens in your story to really develop it, and the choices that you make. Like one of the last campaigns I played, I was playing a dwarf cleric, and I wanted to be like a good guy healer and, nice and devotion, but I ended up finding this like 2 foot tall, or one of the followers we ended up granting was this like 2 foot tall giant mushroom, and he couldn't talk, but he could use spores, which would allow for like, telepathy communication. And I was like, you know what? This thing's my buddy. And he walks really slow, so most people kind of just abandon it. They don't really want to like deal with it because it's slow. So I spent the whole campaign just picking him up, carrying him around, or putting him in a bag, like my little buddy. And now I have in my repertoire for characters to use. In other campaigns, people can stumble upon a dwarf and a giant mushroom with legs and hands that doesn't talk. It's just a little like buddy cop scenario, little thing. But all of a sudden, they just start hearing voices because the thing can spore out and talk. But it's like stuff like that you can't always just come up with, that some other people put their original ideas down, and then just from your experience with those ideas, you've now kind of organically created something else.
Which is a really nice little waylay into talking about the characters in State of Decay 2, which...
Yes. This is another interesting one, because from like typical gameplay and typical like, game design analysis and stuff like that, it's hard to like kind of judge it because it's not really defined. It is kind of random. Like, you pick your starting characters. I think the only characters that are actually given to you are the soldier and the doctor, but then themselves are actually generated as well. The only thing that stays the same is their role. There's always going to be a soldier. Their name and who they are is going to be different. Same with the doctor. There's just that roles of everyone, kind of has different personalities, which is, it's really impressive. It kind of leads for different dynamics and stuff like that too, and all the different traits and stuff they have.
Maybe I haven't dealt with them enough yet, but I haven't gotten a real feel for any of them yet.
The soldier I have was not concerned with being a sheriff. The one that you have seems a lot more kind of hard-strung. Mine was a bit more chill, at least from what I've seen. And,
that's interesting.
Yeah, so there's definitely some differences I've noticed. And if you talk to a character, you'll see they have different traits, and they'll have different personality traits along with that, kind of pros and cons. Some people, are kind of more the braver, maybe a bit more YOLO side. Some could be a bit more thievish, a bit more shy. There's all these different kind of things that get generated. Some people are just, you'll look at them, and this is more for when you're trying to recruit people to your settlement. You kind of want to be careful of who you're selecting. But there's a lot of kind of positive and negative traits that go along with it that kind of determine, you know, how they are. There's, you know, some very negative people that you probably don't want in it because they'll lower morale. They'll kind of just be an asshole to everybody. Stuff like that. But it could also lead to, you know, interesting gameplay things or interesting stories where, you know, you have this one problem character and like, what are you going to do? He's causing problems for everyone. He's, you know, doing all this stuff. Are you going to exile him? Are you going to kick him out? What if they don't want to leave? You know, like what? It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I do actually like that. I think I'm held back a little bit, and I'm glad you're here because I haven't gotten to that point of recruiting extra people. And I think that adds a lot to the characters, because what comes to my mind for good characters in a sandbox style game is Rimworld. That's sort of my standard for it, because I've seen some really interesting Divergent stories come out of Rimworld, like really interesting ones. Where I've always remembered it. Like, it had so much impact on me, it made the whole colony fall apart and die, and I'm like, oh wow.
Yeah. I sent you the trait list, and you'll see that it's a lot. There's quite a pool that they pull from, and they all have their different.
You sent it to me?
Oh, I sent it to the wrong person. Very, very confused. There we go. Yeah, there's quite a few, and you'll see that they have their own. God, this website is not laid out well. It's cutting off for me. They have positive effects, negative effects, as well as some other traits that I can't see because this page isn't responsive and loading for me.
I get sunk into the crunchy management, and I'm like, oh my god, you unruly fuckers, but on the occasion when I actually pay attention, there's some stuff happening. Yeah, people insulting other people. People definitely don't always get along in Rimworld. There's always some conflict within the base, something like that happening. That the story I always remember that developed was a mother and daughter were in my initial landing party, and they encountered a raider who joined our group and ended up marrying the daughter, and then the mother, by just fluke, the mother and the husband of her both ended up working as miners, and in 2 separate mining accidents in like a 3-day span, they both died, and she just cracked. Like she couldn't handle it, and she just completely lost her mind and developed the pyromaniac trait and just walked around lighting my base on fire all night in a stupor daze, and that was the end of that civilization. They all died. Nobody lived through it. Everything fell apart after that. It's a very interesting story.
Yeah, Dwarf Fortress was a big one for me. That was just emergent stories that come out of that stuff. It's nuts. Yeah, the trait list, there's quite a bit in there. It's not as effective as, you know, the stuff that like Rimworld has. It's not as dynamic as that, but it still provides at least, you know, a bit of change, a bit more dynamic to your playthrough, because you can start off with someone who's just an asshole. He's going to cause you problems, and you got to deal with it. Or you could have, you know, a hero, and you can have them be your main person, and then this game has permadeath, so if your character dies, it's a big deal. Everyone's affected, and it's
there's just to give some examples here, there's some minor and major ones, like a little forgetful, a little sadistic, absent-minded. We got some job backgrounds, accountant, action choreographer, action movie extra, action videographer, active duty military A and B. This is all still A's. You can hear me scrolling. I'm into the B's now. Beer lover, beekeeper, behavior analyst, bike courier, biotech scientist, blogger. Scroll. Chef, chemist, chiropractor. Scroll. Delivery driver, dentist. Like, we're into the D's. I'm not going to go through all these, but you get the idea. So where are we at? That's like a high okay, maybe a good at that point.
I wouldn't go into good, because I still would have really liked, you know, some base characters. There are base characters, but I think those base characters could have had a lot more going on for them. And, you know, maybe some other kind of recurring stuff. It's one of those things where for sandbox games, for like a game design kind of analysis, when you're kind of rating them, it's really hard to give them goods, because they're kind of in their own world.
Yeah.
It's not that it's bad, and it's not that, you know, they can't do anything better, or they haven't done their best. It's just that When you boil it down, it's kind of more of a tool rather than a game, because it's kind of up to the player who's playing it to then kind of make their games from it, which is, like I said, it's not a bad thing. That's just kind of what it is. But it's unfair to then, give it bonus stuff for doing that versus other games of more of a traditional nature. So it's just kind of how it falls down, and it's just how certain things are. It's kind of like, certain movies that are super campy and stuff like that. It's, that's what they're going for. There's a market for that. I'm not saying that sandbox games are campy, but they still kind of have that, it's that non-serious feel to them. And there's a certain niche market for it. And even if they do it super well, it's, only to a certain degree. But yeah, I would have liked more base characters that are, a bit more written, more kind of maybe more control of the original character that you can make and kind of get over. Would have liked to kind of be able to choose my story a bit more that way rather than the 3 random ones. I still understand why they did 3 random ones, but it's just kind of a personal take.
Yep. Yeah, I would argue that Rimworld rises to the level of good in characters.
Yeah.
And that's that's sort of the bar for good characters in my mind in sandbox games.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they have those relationships and interactions on that level.
And the narrators.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really good addition.
A little more than a tool to deliver or game loop content to the player. But still better than expected. That traits list surprised me. It did.
Oh yeah. The more you play, you'll kind of see. It's one of those things where it's the nice thing about, multiplayer is nice, but the kind of nice thing about playing the game solo too is that it kind of, you develop more of a relationship with your survivors. Because when you play co-op, the survivor that your buddy's playing is no longer that survivor. They're now your buddy, and you kind of disassociate their personality because, maybe they're a bit more timid or would be kind of complaining before, not as violent. But if the person playing them, I guess when you come in, I play with my own characters, but when just in general, when that happens, when you take them over, you disassociate their personality. So it can get a little bit harder if you're not, trying to roleplay a character or trying to do something. And that gets a lot more difficult when you bring in multiplayer, because maybe your buddy's not going to be down for you, wanting to play as the character that you've taken over is kind of supposed to, or what their traits match, right? They're kind of like, well, let's go shoot some zombies, and it kind of detracts from that. But overall, it's still kind of nice when you still have that civilization now. And the more you play, the more you kind of put personality to the faces, and the more adventures you have with your people, the more you kind of bond with them, and the more you kind of understand them, and the more kind of stressed you'll get when things get harder and the chances of them dying starts kind of going up. Yeah.
The permadeath definitely changes it. And to the view of your buddy saying, let's go shoot zombies, and you saying, I'm on a pacifist. At that point, it's on the player. Just change. Yeah. Go grab your military person and go shoot zombies with them. Your buddy wants to shoot zombies. Grab your person that shoots zombies and go shoot zombies with your buddy.
Yeah.
Story?
Quick rant.
Yeah, quick rant. Yeah. Go ahead, and then we'll do storyline.
And say a quick answer. So, my Chad character almost died. And as a forewarning, when you get plague, I just assume that just having the cure in the inventory would just, putting them, if you check them in and there's a cure, they'll just cure them.
Yeah, no, you got to
use it. But you actually need to take someone to go use it. I had 3 minutes left before they turned. I was like, oh, it was 3 hours. And then I come back after the play. I was about to log off. I'm like, hey, wait, why is he still here? And it's like 3 minutes. I was like, holy shit. Oh shit. So like you came that close to dying, and he was like one of my favorite characters because he was the starting one. I'm like, oh, he was Chad, and his traits were very Chad-like. So just because his name is Chad doesn't mean I'm gonna get, a Chad. I'm like, oh, I don't want a Chad. I've got my Chad, dude. I got my gung-ho super aggressive.
I've got a Chad.
I've got the Chad. But it's stuff like that then emerges, and you get attached to them, right? If it was just characters that you would just replenish, it wouldn't be a big deal. But when you have a history with them, right, you don't want to lose that. You don't want their story just to get cut abruptly short.
Yep. Where are we at for story? And I don't even think there is a story.
I'm leaning more towards bad.
That's where I'm leaning towards too, unfortunately, because I would love more. I would.
Yeah. There are the other game modes. But just that kind of first game mode when they say campaign, they kind of need to add a bit more. And there's actually not a whole lot to it. You're going to be kind of surprised. That's going to be kind of a detractor. It's a minor spoiler, but not too much of a big deal. But when you clear out the plague hearts, that's kind of it. Then you can kind of just exit and restart it. There's not a whole lot of other conflict that goes on. A lot of it is emergent, but it's all kind of just short-lived stuff. I would have liked, maybe something a bit bigger. Even the kind of first game had quite a bit there where you're, trying to figure out, what's going on. You need to set up like a radio, and eventually when you set up the radio, you can kind of call for help, or you get a message and then you can leave, and that's kind of the end of your playthrough.
That sounds better.
This one, you have the radio right at the gate. You can research the exits. Once you research exits, you can go in and leave, and you leave the place permanently. So there's not a whole lot there. It would have been nice to, have a bit more there. You do kind of clear out the whole area eventually. Like I said, you do clear out the play cards, which reduces things out, but there's nothing really their story. It's, of course, it's more sandbox, but just because it's a sandbox doesn't mean there can't be, conflict.
I would like to see, have a more roguelike element where there is an achieved end. Maybe you have to go through 3, 4, 5 maps. It can be a longer game. It doesn't have to be short playthroughs. You can totally do a longer roguelite. I think this game would have worked that way. Maybe after 4 or 5 maps, you gain little pieces of random information on each one, and at the end you find some research base you have to go diving through to actually find out what happened. Maybe there's a cure at the bottom. Maybe you can actually cure it if you clear out 5 maps of progressing difficulty and survive. That something like that would have been amazing. It fits right in the game. It would have been a lot more work, I understand, but it's definitely lacking.
Yeah. So the Heartland DLC launched in 2019, and that one takes you back to the first game's map, and then is a story-driven adventure, which is nice. So even if the base game didn't have it, it's nice that, they were aware of it and they've put it in as a DLC.
Yeah. Which tells me it's probably not an oversight, which I never thought it really would be, but it's probably purely down to what we're always preaching and talking about, scoping. You only have so much money to build a game. You have to work on the areas that matter first.
Yeah, the game definitely seems pretty well scoped, even though we're playing it, way later where it's probably been patched and improved. But at least for content-wise, like, they did what they wanted to for the base game, and then they've kind of implemented the DLCs. And for the first game, the DLCs are very interesting because the base game, like I said, it was story, and then when you finished it, you were done.
Yep.
And then they dropped 2 DLCs. One that was also a bit more like management based. You kind of really it's like what the story was is that you're a military base and you're trying to take back the area and trying to build up our resources. And then the other one was a roguelike where you're just trying to get through. It's the same map as before. You're just trying to get through it, and every time you go through a run, the map gets stronger, and you're basically just trying to survive as long as you can. It became like a, one of those ones where it's like a holdout, like an actual more of like a survival game. There was like a lot more brutal in the resources and stuff like that. But it's nice that they go back and they're still adding the content and stuff like that. And I'm excited to try the Heartland DLC eventually. But reviewing just the base game, there is no story. There's nothing there, which is sandbox, so we understand, but we can't give an okay to something that doesn't exist.
Just because it's sandbox doesn't mean it doesn't have story. Rimworld has story.
Yeah.
Kenshi has story. It's a make your own story, but it evolves very quickly. There are kingdoms and interactions and so much stuff all around it that there's already an existing story that you're being inserted into.
Yeah, there's conflict. I think the big thing is missing. It's missing meaningful conflict.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Like, even if they put some enemy enclave that you can wipe out, some big bad that's exploiting things that are doing bad things, someone like a Negan from The Walking Dead or something like that. There's some conflict. It can be standard for each playthrough, but at least it's there and it provides some sort of more of a better end goal, more of an actual resolution rather than just kind of, well, there was plague hearts. We don't really know why they're there or how they're there, and we destroyed them, so now we can leave. Like, there's nothing really bringing or improving things to that. It's that would have been a nice addition.
Yeah, you're picking sides pretty quick in Kenshi, or choosing not to. Exactly.
Oh, what's the
conflict?
The religious cult? I can't remember what they're called.
I don't know, but I had a great
Holy
story
Flame?
come out of them. Yeah, something like that.
It's just like, do you have a book? It's like, maybe. Yeah.
I left the book on the ground outside my base, so that the Holy Nation, so that when they'd come and make me do prayer with them, I just pick it up off the ground. So quick story on that one. That was my first time playing Kenshi, and I played a female character.
Oh no.
So I started making this base outside their walls, and then they came along and went, "Is the master of the house home?" And I went, "He's out." Just lied through my teeth, and lied a couple times, and they started doubting me. So I ran to the place, and I hired 2 men to help me work the fields and stuff like that. And then whenever they'd come to inspect the place, I'd send one of them out, and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, I own this." And that was how I survived.
Kenshi's it's amazing. It's so weird.
I can't believe the depth in it. That I was actually able to just like in my mind I was like, oh please, just let me hire this guy and have him pretend to be the head of the household, so that I can just send my servant out and he can talk to them and we'll be fine.
Pissing off the Holy Nation's a bad time until you get like 8 harpoon guns or something. But it's cool because they're also like the safest area because they're so aggressive, so that you always just want to build there, because if you build anywhere else, you're just gonna get eaten.
Yep. They keep it real safe if you're on their good side. That's how my first playthrough ended. I wasn't paying attention when they came to pray, and I missed it, and that was the end.
There's not much you can do at that point.
All right, performance. I don't know. Runs fine on my computer.
it runs. Yeah, like I said, like we're kind of skewed at that, but I'll quickly check PC Gaming Wiki.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
I haven't had any problems. I haven't heard anyone had problems on even on the consoles and stuff like that. And the first game ran fairly smooth, really smooth too. Check that to make sure there's nothing in because the game is decently buggy, but they're not too much of performance bugs. A lot of them are just physics bugs, which just happens.
I see a couple guides on how to increase FPS dramatically.
That happens with a lot of Windows.
I'm betting it's just taking advantage of new hardware with reg tweaks and stuff, because they're pretty new videos.
Yeah, I'm running at what at least I should be. Like, I'm not.
Yeah.
Like, if we were stuttering or having any issues, then it would be bad. But like I said, we're pretty far in the skew. But if we're not having anything, then there's at least an achievable goal of a high FPS. I mean, there's games out there like Tarkov.
The recommended for it is an Intel i5 2500 2.7 gigahertz or an AMD FX 6300 with 8 gigs of RAM and a GTX 760 or an AMD Radeon HD 7870.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
Yeah, everyone should have that by now. Like, those are. Well, at least that's for
you
minimum.
You should be able to run this game. That wasn't me minimum. Like that was recommended. Yeah. Is it maybe it says requirements?
Yeah, I'm on PC Gaming Wiki and it says the minimum was 760. Recommended is 960, but even then, a 960, even that's like, it's not like a 980 or anything like that. A 960 was, pretty common even back then. So
on Steam, it's a minimum i5 2500 and a recommended i5 4570. So that's still pretty low end there. You should be able to run this game. Period. Yeah, you should be able to run this game.
Yeah.
Animation.
Okay. Yeah, it's okay.
It's okay.
It's the shooting and attacking and everything's fine. A lot of popping with there's not really a good transition to you, like, I'm not sure if you notice the stealth killing, but most of the time when you stealth kill something, it just like explodes and pops off and just kind of has some weird silliness to it, which was kind of more of like a feel for the game and just how it is. It's just kind of fun, silly stuff when it happens. But from an animation perspective, they're not smooth transitions at all. There's not a whole lot of them. It's okay. It might have been nice, a bit more fidelity. There's still a lot of quality could be added, but it definitely serves. It doesn't detract from the experience and all. Everything is, at least what's there, is still very well polished.
Yeah, what I said is there is some popping and funny ragdoll, but it ends up being more charming than jarring.
Yeah.
More laughing at the hilarity of it than being like, oh, it's so unreal, because it's never trying to be real. Style's okay.
Yeah, style's an interesting one too, because there's quite a bit, because it does definitely has a distinctive style to it, but it's not distinctive and unique across like the board. It's definitely has that kind of you know, soft shadows. The most unique thing about it would be the zombies, and kind of how they are. But at the same time, they're just either yellow-eyed or red-eyed or covered in blood. There's not a whole lot of dynamic between them. You know, this would have been a nice time for, you know, the style to really show if the game had a bit more personality, a bit more depth. You know, style that can bleed between all the cars, it can bleed between the towns, can bleed between the characters and the weapons and stuff like that. But it's just kind of, like I said, it's lacking a bit more depth. Like an example of more personality, if you look at Dead Rising, you know, kind of similar game where there's zombies, but that game, you know, for the time had quite a bit of style. Like you're in a mall and everything's, you know, centered around that kind of theme of everything's mall related. You have all your weapons, everything's the zombies that are there. It's got that trapped in a mall theme, trapped in a mall style. This one's kind of just open world sandbox. I do like how it looks. I do like, you know, the choices they've made, but there's still quite a room. I'd love to see like a State of Decay 2 personality. Would love to have it have its own, take that charm and that humor, maybe bump it up a little bit more, maybe, you know, make it a bit more unique, a bit more flavor.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you on that. I don't know anything about the music. I don't remember it at all. Is it even there? Does it have music?
Yeah, it does. It has music, but it's definitely one of those things that's very atmospheric. I would have loved to have it. This is one of the things that this is what comes with budget. You know, I'm not saying that the game's bad because it doesn't have it. These are just examples of improvements that I could made. But you know, cars can have radios and stuff like that, or you know, you can have music playing at the base. Maybe you have a radio at your base. Doesn't always make sense with zombies, but maybe it's one of the trade-offs where you can turn on the radio and it boosts morale, but increases your zombie threat a bit. You know, stuff like that. And maybe it's not radio, but you can have, you know, maybe a music player or something. There is atmospheric music, so there is stuff for when it's, you know, a horde or combat and stuff like that. But it's, you know, the purpose of that stuff is not to be noticeable. It's supposed to enhance the experience, but not be in your face. And it's one of those things where if you're not explicitly listening for it, you're not going to notice it. And that's, if you're not noticing it, you know, that's, you know, a good thing.
Your stereo idea adds a collectible to the game quite nicely in letting you find music that you can play at the base to boost morale. Hell, integrate it to the awesome character trait system you've already got and make some people like different types of music.
Yeah, it could start conflict, right? One person wants to play Space Country and they get really pissed off. Everyone else just gets really pissed off.
Let's be honest, nobody wants to play Space Country.
There's at least one person out there that thought that was okay. Someone pitched that idea.
I'm sure it was pitched as, hey, they'll give us this much money to play this song here.
God.
Is there voice acting?
Yeah. All the characters are voice acted. And the voice acting is actually pretty decent. I'd say, especially for randomly generated characters, they do a good job of kind of still conveying personality. It just kind of sucks because there's not enough writing and not enough dialogue to really, for me to say it's got, you know, great and outstanding. But I'd say it's on a higher K, very close to good. But when you're playing it, it's kind of the thing that gets attractive when you're playing multiplayer, because when you're playing multiplayer, you're usually just the two people and they're not really going to converse with each other too much, because it can be kind of immersion breaking if your person's saying stuff that you're not really thinking of saying and you're controlling them. It can kind of be an issue. But you'll notice when you're interacting with the settlements, or you're interacting with other enclaves, that when they talk, they do feel like people. If they're scared, they actually feel like they're scared. It's one of those things where, you know, like voice acting is pretty important, especially in kind of more horror side of things, or even the charm they get when people are saying silly stuff like, oh, that was a close one, or they'll, depending on what your character is, if they're more on that silly side, they do actually convey that quite a bit. And the more serious characters do come off, you know, blunt and a bit more aggressive.
Good. That's pretty important. From what I was playing, the sound effects were okay.
Yeah.
I mean, the gun doesn't make a squeaking noise at least, but it's pretty anemic.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot. The cars sound decent, but at the same time, there's like it's you know, it supplements the experience, doesn't improve it. And guns sound okay, definitely a lot of improvements for that. Zombies sound okay, but still not a whole lot. Kind of, you know, there's still room for improvement.
Everything sounds like it should, but could sound better.
Yeah, it's definitely noticeable when like certain sound clips just play. You know, it's not like you don't always feel like it's from a result of the interaction. It is just this like, oh, I hit a state point and now it's going to play. You know, oh, you made noise while searching sound. It's always the same.
Hey, Punk, welcome. How's your weekend? How's your weekend? Do you know State of Decay 2? Are you a fan? You played it?
Hi.
You got opinions to include? So I haven't played it as much as you, but I haven't seen any pathing break, at least. The zombies always made it to me. My follower followed me reasonably well.
Yeah, I would like a little bit more advanced. Like I said, these are all a lot of my stuff with this game. These aren't really complaints. It's just like I said, when we do analysis, it's you like to say where there's improvement to be made. And with games I made, it's not always like I said, it's not negative feedback. It's just what they've done is great. The AI they have supplements it, perfectly. It's the zombies do act like zombies. Your companions, act like companions. You don't feel like you're doing like a follow or an escort quest. They do a decent job of keeping up with you. They do a decent job of fighting the things that you're fighting, but it does feel a bit hollow. I would have liked, when you have a companion, it always kind of just feels like the same companion now, just wearing a different skin. That's something that's incredibly hard to do. So it's, definitely not going to be in scope, and it's not something I would have expected to have, but like I'm saying, it's just stuff for reasons that could be improved. Same with zombies. Zombies, of course, are very dumb. Some of them are a bit smarter. There was the Juggernaut that we just shot in the head like 20 times, and eventually it kind of figured out that, it was getting shot in the head and stumbled over to us and then died. So it's, stuff like that. It's like, okay, yeah, it's more casual, so it's kind of fun that we can do that, but it would have been nice for it to, as soon as it gets hits, it knows something is shooting it, even if it doesn't know from where, from whenever, say like a silencer or something, it can at least, go after it. And you'll kind of find when you use silencers that like you can use a silencer and shoot a zombie in the head and its buddies just don't even realize that it happened. And, it's one of those things like I get they're zombies, but at the same time, we kind of need for the experience that they could still, react to something like dying like that in front of them, because they do seem to have, a group mentality because they do move in groups.
Well, I think the packing of zombies is a natural phenomenon of them, just because they're attracted to the same types of things, like groups of insects.
Yeah, and it's the thing where like if one just like exploded or died, you think that they're. I would have liked some curiosity or something. Like I said, it's not what they have there was great for zombies and perfect for zombies. They're just improvements that could have been made, but no, that they path well. They they don't really bug out. They don't just start de-aggroing randomly like that. They stay fairly aggressive.
It doesn't spend its entire lifetime rolling back and forth over a box.
Oh my god, yeah, it doesn't. I mean, even then, if that was to happen, at least it makes sense for a zombie, not for some like super like AI enhanced boss being, and just like how'd you kill this thing that wiped out all these police squads? Like, oh, I just kind of played musical chairs with it, and it just couldn't figure out that if it stopped doing that, it could just shoot me. It's like at no point did the behavior tree being like, am I doing the same thing over and over again and not achieving different results? It's like, oh yeah, turns out your AI is insane.
You worked your booty off, huh? Well, at least it makes the week go quick, and it gets you a payday, typically. Accessibilities?
There's a fair bit. I need to go through it. I think there's some stuff that's probably missing. I really do like that there's some kind of smaller touches that most people may not have noticed. Like one I brought up was when you're playing co-op, we have different color loot symbols, but there's also the dots. There's a dot in there, so if there's a color deficiency, we don't have to rely on those colors. We'd be able to tell that two dots. Okay, well I'm player two, so I'm two dots, and stuff like that.
Yeah, it has full key rebinding for controllers and keyboards. All the standard advanced video options. I'm looking through screenshots of the options. The only thing that I haven't been able to find is the HUD settings. Yeah, key bindings, that's wonderful. We don't have a UI UX area, but I would put a bad on this one because the multiplayer was just so damn confusing.
That's unfortunately not the game's fault. That's just Xbox. When you
it has good gamepad controls. Yeah, the controls are good, but I'm talking control rebinding. which most console games didn't have for a long, 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 long time. Where you can, like, you know, change up on the D-pad to shoot. That's how deep you can go with this game's rebinding. You can change left on the D-pad to jump and up to shoot and just whatever you want. Go nuts.
Yeah, for that menu stuff, like I said, it's one of those things we kind of take for granted for most things. Like Steam has just simplified the process because Steam provides Steam API. And the problem now we kind of have with these multi-platform games is they kind of have to be agnostic now, which means that they can't define it really in game. It has to be handled by whatever thing is serving the game, which means is they just kind of have to provide, like, but the basic level provide that. Would have been nicer if they had a bit more, you know, some sort of help for some documentation. Things were still confusing on, oh, I need to, you know, host it here in this random setting that's, you know, here, and then do it. It would have been nice to, you know, still have, you know, a multiplayer as a separate setting that's there. But the problem, like the reason for that is, you know, console design games, you're going to join an Xbox party. And then when you launch the game, you know, you invite them through all Xbox. Same with Steam, you invite them through, you know, the application hosting the game's interface. It's all done externally from the games typically. So when I was playing on Steam and you were playing on Xbox, it got, you know, we're doing cross-platform, and cross-platform is a nightmare, unfortunately.
Yep. I was, oh, you were on Steam?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That was part of it. But still, just me turning on multiplayer and getting into a multiplayer mode from my own standpoint was it was a hassle and a headache and confusing. And I'm a network and systems guy that works in software. Like, I know everything, all the different aspects and angles. And if I had a hard time figuring it out, then I'm pretty sure most people would.
Yeah, like it really should just be like, because on the radio you can trigger, you know, you can volunteer yourself to be, you can volunteer yourself to be invited to networking games, and it would have been nice to be able to do that from, you know, that same in-game menu as well. You know, go there and be like, open up my community for players. It's the same thing, you know, Animal Crossing, a bunch of other games do. It just unfortunately also comes down to a technical limitation when, you know, if you implement that, usually they're implementing it towards an API, and there aren't any that are going to cross-platform support both, you know, Steam and Xbox if it's on PC.
Yeah. So to summarize State of Decay 2's accessibility, no colorblind issues. There's no colorblind mode, but there's no colorblind issues because there's no real use of color. Everything's kind of monocolor anyway for all the UI.
Yeah.
There is subtitles. We would like a closed caption maybe so that you can hear or see zombies making sounds if you're deaf. That's maybe the one thing I can think of. But with the complete controller rebinding, you can use any controller and any keys and it'll work. There's individual audio sliders, there's field of view adjustment, there's, you know, what's it missing? Are we at a good? Or is that an okay?
I feel like, I don't know, I feel like there's probably something missing, but like I said, the game's pretty simplistic, so, you know, the use of color I really see is the eyes, but at the same time, the plague zombies are covered in blood anyways, and they're usually, you know, that's pretty distinctive rather than the clothing they wear, because you don't really see clothing, you just see like a solid color, so that's, you know, probably not as an issue, but I don't think there's anything that's really gameplay specific. Everything kind of has symbols for it. Everything is kind of already monochrome for UI for the actual items and stuff like that too.
Hey Glenn, welcome. So as I was saying, you get the open in new tab. No. An image in new tab. There we go. So you get the plague zombies, which look like this, and they're, you know, distinctly colored a different color from the normal ones, which are more of a gray. That's sort of the only one. And that's quite a contrast. There's no like red and green use, red and blue use, yellow. Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I have no real problem with, other than that, it's like sizes and distinct visual look to distinguish them from there. So I don't think it really needs colorblind mode adjustment. It would have been a substantial undertaking to put it into this game for very, very minimal return. Yeah, becoming easier now.
A nice thing I like too is how dynamic the difficulty settings are. You can adjust absolutely everything, which is really important for a sandbox game, but I'd also still like to see in a lot of other games as well.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you.
Because, yeah, it's one of the things that The Last of Us Part 2 actually did pretty well, is they have a fully adjustable difficulty setting, because difficulty isn't always just easy, medium, or hard for people. If there's some people who just can't sneak due to some limitation, it's nice that they can disable that part, but if they still like combat, they don't have to dumb down the whole experience or reduce the whole experience just because of one part they can't do. It's nice that they can adjust it to their playstyle if they, for whatever reason, or the opposite. Maybe they don't have the ability to aim and shoot as fast, so a lot of these games now will have aim assist built in that they can enable, and AI strength, AI, everything is kind of adjustable to how, you can trust the players. They'll know the experience they're looking for and kind of what's going to go up with them. It's nice that, it's not just normal hard where, hard means everything's just harder. It's nice that you can adjust it where, it can still be a challenge for a player, but doesn't have to be, impossible for them given, a certain scenario. They can adjust it so that the game is still challenging for the aspects they care about, but they can still, make things that, aren't as accessible to them, they don't have to worry about. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, look into Last of Us Part 2, because they do it really well. And there was some other game that I recently played, I was talking about before, where they kind of had
we've been talking about it all day. So Rimworld does variable difficulty sliders really well.
I think was it We Happy Few kind of had that too, maybe. I think you could adjust the AI for certain aspects, and stuff like that.
Recently Breath Edge as well had an individual slider for combat, for survival, for something else as well, where you could turn down the survival aspects so you don't get punished and you don't need to worry about food and drink as much, and you could focus on the building or just worry about the part of the game that you enjoy, which is a lovely ad. We really wanted them for Fallen Order, and we were happy that it showed us the different areas that were changing and how much, but we really wanted to be able to slide them ourselves.
Yeah, it's one of the things, like if you give that freedom to the player, you have to trust them that they'll know what they want. It's one of those, like an older solidifying thing, or it's like we need a hard or a very hard mode so that there's achievements linked to it. So there's a congratulations for being on a very hard, when it should be, we don't really have to do that too much anymore. We should be able just to kind of let players set their own challenge limits. And, if someone wants to just max out all the sliders, let them do that. But if they want to max out, let's say the combat sliders on one thing, but still, reduce stealth, maybe they're not great at sneaking. They don't want the AI to instantly notice them. They want to be able to sneak around, and then if they get caught, they can still have a hard fight. It's, and you can still set the predefined ones. You can have, your predefined options, and then what most things do is they have a custom setting. You set the custom and change it to whatever.
Yep. Though I'm still behind certain games just not having a difficulty for reasons as well. Dark Souls is fine. It doesn't need a difficulty to make it more accessible. Things like that. The difficulty is core to the mechanic of the game.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it kind of comes down to like a purism approach to design, and video games are an art form. But I gotta say, I still feel bad just telling people that they just can't play a game because they're just not able to.
Yeah, I agree. There's our Dark Souls reference for the show. Yep. Apply the same sliders from graphics to difficulty for certain games. You have predefined profiles, but allow the player to customize. Some do it with profiles that you can customize, and some have full-on slider. Like, I As an example, for Fallen Order, one of the things that was changing was the parry time window. And we felt on the Jedi Master setting, the combat was the most fun. We liked how much damage things took. We liked how much damage we took. We liked the pacing of it all. We liked that the AI was more aggressive, but we found the parry timing so unnatural and unfun that we dropped it down one difficulty, where we had less fun with the combat, but we could actually play with the parry system more freely and comfortably. And it was just more fun in general. And if I could have had all the other settings and just opened up that parry window a little bit, I would have loved to have done that. I think I would have had way more fun with the game.
Yeah, and like technically speaking, there's not, you know, it's not really a whole reason why we shouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean they're already just making those settings changes themselves. Just granularize it.
And it's like engine tweaks and stuff like that, and it's mostly because the reason, like, we'll look back, is because difficulty is designed and set. But it's one of those things where, you know, you can still open that up to some players. You can have them predefined, you know, like your typical low, medium, high, but then you can do custom, and it kind of expose that back end with a message saying like, hey, you know, you're messing with the game here. You can, you know, advanced use only kind of thing, right? Like, you have an idea that if you're going to max everything out, you know, it might be too hard or like frustratingly difficult. But I think it's just, we just need that, we need that kind of trust. And it's one of those things where, like, sure, we're going to be letting players shoot themselves in the foot, but, you know, I think we're at a point now where we can just say like, hey, you know, if you shot yourself in the foot and it hurt, like, maybe don't do that.
Yep. Yep. I'm 100% behind that. Hey, it hurts when I do this. Don't do that. I want to get a shirt based on yours, but it says git rebase or git merge.
Git rebase main force. My changes are going in. Clock up for the day.
And then trigger pointless debates with random system engineers as I wear it. Just wearing it would trigger those debates. Okay, let's try to finish this because it's already 5. Yeah. Mechanics.
Yeah. I'd probably say high okay. Like, there's still a lot missing from a sandbox experience that would, you know, I'd say could be added and push me to a good. It has fairly limited mechanics itself, but what's there is still very polished and fun. But it can get, you know, pretty repetitive pretty quick. You know, like a bit more robustness with the bases. You know, you're very limited like all the time. You get like one or two slots, and that's kind of it. Bit more interaction with the people themselves, you know, maybe individual relationships between the two, you know, managing that, you know, maybe 2 survivors can really end up just hating each other, and you're gonna, bro, I'm saying that also could be possible, but it's not something that's at least inherent in like a 20 hours of casual play at first. There's a lot of depth that could be added, but once again, like we say, this is you know, it's an indie game. It's not a AAA budget, AAA costing game. It's got its scope and it hits it well, but these are just improvements like we made. Cars are interesting. I love the addition of them, but I do think that cars are very frequent and very OP. But this is more of, like I said, a personal preference too, because it's a casual game, so it's fine. But like, you're running into a problem where you just have so many cars, and fuel does go down quite a bit. It is a problem, but it's also like not much there. Yeah.
How do you feel about the shooting mechanics? Since that's really where the game is kind of more focusing. Everything else is streamlined to keep you out in the field, shooting, gathering, and pushing.
Yeah, the shooting is really easy. There's aim assist you can turn on if you want it. They're not really trying to make it difficult. It's nothing to like really run home again. Like, you just kind of zoom in. There's no scoping or anything like that because the game is always just third person, which is fine. It might have been nice with the sniper rifles to really get kind of like a super zoom in and like picking off zombies that are far away, but the shooting, it feels like, hey, you run into an area, if you want to shoot a gun a bunch of times, you can. With all the different guns, you know, have distinct feels to them. Silencers are a nice approach. The melee combat is, you know, quite fun. You're just beating things up and executing them, and stealthing is not. It's you can do it, and it's easy to do it. It's not super forced on you. Everything is fairly well done. It's polished, but I would just like a bit more, you know, a bit more going on. You can kind of scratch everything you need to in the first kind of couple hours, and there isn't a whole lot after that.
To reference another game we've been talking about recently in other panels, it kind of feels like it has that Spore thing going on with your description, where it's got a lot there, but everything's just kind of only surface deep.
Kind of. I find Spore tried to do too much, whereas
Yeah.
I think this one they had a smaller scope and they did it well. It's
Yep.
just maybe a bit more. Like it's definitely polished. There's no mechanics that really like bug me or piss me off or anything like that, or anything that feels like it was shoehorned in. It's just a bit more would have been a bit more nice. Like I said, but it is just a casual game, so you kind of just it gives you what you're supposed to do and you kind of just keep doing it, but it can get old pretty quick. I do like the searching. I do like how you can take the gamble on I'm doing it on a normal playthrough at least. That mechanic doesn't really mean anything because it's only going to spawn or find one zombie. There's never really an actual threat for it. It's something that's probably on a higher difficulties, but it just kind of sucks for that default, the one that they package and give to you by default. That doesn't really matter too much. I always just do speed search and I've never had like an actual problem from it.
Yeah, I thought that speed search you would find less stuff is how I interpreted it at first, which would make more sense.
If it was find less stuff, then I think it's one of those things where no one would really ever take the gamble. But
yeah.
I guess that would make sense. I guess if it didn't make noise, you just found less stuff. I guess that makes sense because you're just trying to get in and out. I do like their approach that it makes noise. It's just that like the punishment for making noise is like
not enough.
Not enough. Like if it really made it a problem, or I think at some situations it can because there's maybe more zombies around, but for the most part it's not too big of a problem.
I really don't ever see a reason to not use it.
Yeah, if anything, I want zombies to kill, so it's like we're good.
Yay, more targets to spawn. Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Bugs isn't okay. You will hit bugs, but they won't ruin your game.
Yeah, there's like some stuff that can be a bit frustrating. The car stuff, it's hilarious and all, but can get annoying depending on what happens. Sometimes you'll just launch your car. Sometimes with multiplayer stuff, you can lose some inventory that are in cars, but it's kind of also the assumption that like anything you don't want to lose is going to go into your stash.
Yeah.
So it's kind of on you to not just use cars as storage. It's nice that you can. I do appreciate that we can just load up cars. And it's not like once we hit a storage stash, we're just screwed. And now you're like, well, what do? I just have to sit here and wait until my resources go back down while I have all this stuff. It's also nice that you can break stuff down.
Yep.
Otherwise, I haven't ran into anything where like, guns don't shoot, or I haven't fallen through the map yet, which is nice. I'm sure it's possible.
Yep. I fell through the map many times in No Man's Sky when I was playing it recently.
Oh god, yeah, I do that all the time still in that game.
Tried to dig through a mountain, and it turns out they only had a little bit of the surface of the mountain, and as soon as I got through, all I could see was infinity, and I could see the back of everything, so none of the textures were rendering, and I could freely jump into that hole and take fall damage and spawn at the top of the mountain. This is a good one. RNG. You've done more maps than I have.
It's one of the games. This game is very RNG heavy.
Oh yeah, I know it is, but it has to be.
And I say it has to be, and I'd say they actually do it well. I think this is kind of the examples of kind of how to use RNG is to add a little bit of replayability or add some dynamic feel to it, and it's unpredictable. Like it's that nice balance between unpredictable but still kind of you still have a sense of what's going to happen. Like the loot you get is random, as in like you don't know what's going to be lootable in the building, but what is lootable in the building, like the loot itself is going to be random, but the certain containers, if it's like a weapons case, have a high chance of it, having ammo or having a weapon. It's going to be random what you get, but it's not like completely random. Like bad random, I would say, is just like no matter what, you're just going to get something random, and you're going to be looting like a police station and a weapons locker, and you're going to find like
a teddy bear,
a teddy bear or like a salad. Yeah, it's like, well, why is this in here? So it's still relevant like that. What's lootable is random. The loot crates themselves, but the loot tables they actually use still have some reference to them.
And it's honestly the RNG approach to RNG loot that I'm always touting and talking about and saying to use. Loot off of planned loot tables attached to containers is the way to do your RNG loot. Because every time somebody searches that container, it makes fucking sense.
Yeah. They know what they're finding. You can have rarer stuff in there. Could be a nice pleasant surprise, but it's, you're not going to be searching like a small box and then find like a minigun. Like, okay, how'd this fit in here? Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, if it's a loot crate and you don't want them to necessarily, or like a weapons locker, and you don't necessarily want them to get something good out of it, you can easily give them a little 22 long rifle. It still made sense to be in there. It's going to be worthless. They're probably not going to use it. Yeah,
or like weapon parts, or like something at least still kind of relevant. And then characters are random, events are random, stuff like that. Like that stuff's really well done. Like the character dynamics are nice. The events aren't, too in your face all the time. That's one thing that was kind of annoying about Fallout 4 is it seemed like every couple of minutes you're getting pinged being like, a settlement needs your help. And it's like, I want to do my own thing for a bit. You guys take care of yourselves.
At first I was like, oh really? And then it was a settlement's under attack, and I was like, doesn't matter. Because it would be like, they've killed everyone at your settlement. I've repaired the things by using a fraction of the resources that I gathered while ignoring that alert. And then the next time I travel to the town, oh look, it's completely repopulated by new people doing all the jobs that were left here. Look, because I don't know the name of anybody in the town anyway, and I never cared about them, nothing's changed. There's no impact at all. Why are you even doing this? Why did you even buy the Fallout IP, you monsters?
I mean, at least for this, like the stuff, there's random events. You don't absolutely do them. They kind of make sense. It's nice that they're still scoped for certain characters, and certain characters with certain traits get certain events that they can do, which is nice. And enclaves need help. There's always different things going on for them. Some of them are kind of just fetch quests, which are kind of lame, but at least some are a bit more dynamic. Helping with raids or helping with hordes and stuff like that. I don't think we've had to do any like player or bandit raids yet, but those can be kind of fun when you're not just killing zombies but actually trying to because there's different tactics you can do for those. We haven't run into that yet, which is a neat mechanic. Is one of the ones you'll have to do is someone will say, hey, these people stole from us, and you don't necessarily know the full story, so you don't know if they actually stole. You don't know if they're bullshitting you, because you can just go in guns blazing and kill them and get their shit back, but you don't actually know if that's the case, right? So you can try talking to them first, but if you try talking for them first, you risk the the possibility that they just attack you after talking to you. You're going to be not in a great position, but it's still some stuff going on with that, and those ones are random for their outcome. Sometimes they did steal it, sometimes they didn't, sometimes they'll give you up the stuff if you threaten them, sometimes they won't.
That's good. They need that interaction of, can I trust this person in front of me when you're encountering them, because that's really core to the zombie experience. It really is. So we're at an okay on writing. The storyline's bad, but it doesn't.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah,
this is just okay across the board. It's an okay game, and if you like zombies and building things, then there's no reason you won't like it.
Yeah, this is one of those things where you'll notice with a lot of sandbox games is that when you try to break them down or analyze them, they'll show up as just okay.
Yep.
And that's not a bad thing. That's just that's because it's not always really a game. It's more of a tool for the player to use to create their own games in it, and the games they create in it can be good.
Yep, but at the end of the day, as a game, it's okay. It does its thing. It can be played, and it doesn't break and fall apart, and it's fine. But there are sandbox games that do raise up to that good level, so it's nice to find them once in a while. Hey, welcome. We just finished talking about an entirely okay game. But it used RNG well, and it has good performance. Runs on a potato. So it's less a curated experience and more of an enabler for the player to make their own experiences? Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It's emergent gameplay and emergent stories. Like one quick tangent before we move on. When I was bringing up the bandit stuff, the story that happened with me is I was doing a solo where I was going out to help the person solo, and when they said all these people stole from us, they have guns, we have to go get our stuff back. I was kind of like, well, I'm by myself. I kind of like the character I'm with. I don't want my guy to die. And then you kind of have the option of, do I bring one of these people with this settlement with me just in case? So I brought the person with me, and it was only like a 2-person enclave. And we go out, we confront the people. I say, hey, did you steal it? They're like, oh, yeah, whatever, here, you can have it. And they drop it. And then as I go to pick it up, they all started shooting. And I managed to shoot both of them. And my person survived, but the person that I brought with me got shot in the head and was just dead on the ground with them. So all 3 people died. I was like, oh shit. And then the character goes, oh, I better go tell, better go tell them what happened. So then I had to take the stuff, put in the car, drive back, and be like, yo, sorry, your buddy got wrecked. He's like, oh, what do I do? And I'm like, well, you can come live with me, I guess. I'm not just gonna make you live by yourself. So now I have a settler in my settlement that has a backstory. Like, he was with his buddy, and unfortunately his buddy got murdered by some people, and now he's with us. So it's emergent stories like that are kind of neat to have, and you can't just always script them out, because there's a chance that if I was quicker, I could have killed those 2 people before that person's buddy died. I would have just dropped them off. They would have carried on their own way.
Yep. I talked about a similar story earlier with Rimworld too. I won't say it again, but the whole multiple mining accidents and person developing pyromania and starting to burn down my settlement at night and stuff. That was all. That was all not scripted. It's just it comes out of you playing the game.
And it's just the things that just allow you to share stories with other people is just fantastic.
Yeah.
Because if everyone shared the same story, then, you know, it's not as special. Everyone's like, oh, you just got to that part where that happens. But if it's something that's unique to you, you know, you get that feeling of uniqueness. You get that, you know, it's special. It's nice to have, you know, something special happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And those things that, yeah, only you will ever experience. You know, it's so random. So random. All right. From sandbox game to super formulaic action mining simulator. Nothing wrong with formulaic.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing wrong with formulaic. Its formula is fantastic.
I feel like it's going to be a lot of goods, but still some okays. There's still definitely room for improvement on some things.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Though I think there's going to be some surprising marks across the board here for some people. Quick show of hands as I grab a coffee and Pseudo begins talking about the lack of world building in the game. Who's actually played Deeprock Galactic? How many people in chat have actually played it? Who's been a diggy dwarf?
It's one of those things where you have to mine the story out as well. It's not necessarily there.
You've played it, but haven't reset a character yet. Okay, yeah, it's not so much world building as much as world digging. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got 25 hours, so I've played a fair bit, but not, you know, a whole lot.
Yeah, I'll be right back. You can go ahead and start typing. You should have access.
Yeah, I'll start just rambling first. But yeah, it's got some world building. There's definitely a world they've created. You know, your space dwarves, your mining, the hub that you're at kind of presents a lot of stuff that's there. You kind of explore around. You can kind of get a feel for what's going on, and it breaks down the planets are there and what's going on. But there's not a whole lot of depth at first, at least from what I've found so far, of kind of what's happening or what's going on, or even why we're doing it. You know, I get it that, you know, we're under contract, we're getting money, but we don't really, you know, see that money. We don't really see that progress. We don't really feel like there's any kind of end. The game doesn't really communicate any sort of, you know, conflict or any kind of end. You're just, you know, there's bugs and we just have our day job. And that might be the intention. That might be fine. But, you know, it might have been nice to maybe solidify that a bit more. I still feel like there's always something coming. You know, there's maybe something next once we hit, you know, the certain level cap that unlocks, you know, a bit more of the content. But at least for like my 25 hours I've played, if someone wants to ask like, what's the story of the game or what's the world it's in, it's like, well, there's got, you know, a fair bit of world to it, but so far there's not really much of a story. It's kind of just I'm a space dwarf doing my 9 to 5, doing my job. And they ask, well, what's the world like? And I'm like, well, I know there's dwarves. There's 3 of them. Other than that, I'm not too sure. You don't really see any of the characters, not much reference to them outside of just kind of narration. Same with like the bugs and the bug worlds. They're kind of just enemies. I don't know if there's any kind of sentience really to them, of, you know, if they're any kind of high level intelligence. Nothing really like conflict wise on that. They're kind of just, you know, it's the 9 to 5, which is, you know, it's fine. And it's a choice to be making. It's one of those things where like a game doesn't have to have, you know, grades across the board to be a great game. It's entirely fine to have design decisions that limit certain aspects but really enhance other ones. I don't think it's possible to really hit like a good and absolutely everything. Like there are sacrifices that have to make, and that's just how things are. Like restrictions have to be made, like limitations are made and restrictions have to be made.
I have not played Nemoria, though I believe I own it. I think I was waiting for it to get more complete.
I went on a long ramble. I didn't get a chance to type yet, but the gist of it was basically saying that there is like a fair bit of world there, but it doesn't really get expanded too much. And same, like I jumped a bit ahead for storyline, kind of saying the same thing, where someone's to ask me, you know, what the world is. I'd say, well, we're space dwarves, but there's not a whole lot more to it. You know, I don't really know that much about the company that I'm working for yet. I don't really know why I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't really know, you know, what's going on. There's the hub that we're at. There are the planets and everything, but I don't really know much about the aliens. I don't know if there's any kind of, sentience or any kind of, high level of intelligence, if they're organized or if these are just, critters that are just kind of in my way that we're just clearing out.
It's scared! Hey, Black Rose, welcome.
Hello. I would have loved some Starship Trooper references.
I think there are some, but it needs more.
Well, there's definitely some with bugs, but yeah, I would have loved, a bit more of that. Yeah, the world that they're providing, like there are worlds and there's some stuff to it, but there could have been more. There could have been a whole atmosphere and a whole universe. Their whole, the Deeprock universe that would really pull you in. It's possible that there is some that we just haven't, dug to it yet, but with 25 hours, there hasn't been much of an inclination to that coming up either. So it's hard for me to, go off on a whim and say that. And also just for a world building thing, if I was to tell someone like, oh no, it's got good world building, you just need to dump 40 hours into it. That's not really going to be great. That goes for any kind of these things, good. Right? It's like saying, oh, the characters suck for the first 40 hours, but after 40 hours, it's good that it's, as an overall judging experience, it needs to be, from the whole playthrough, how it was.
Yeah, that was what game was it? It was that most recently happened to me with somebody talking about Death Stranding. I was talking about how it's kind of slow and boring. They're like, oh, it gets really interesting after the first 8 hours. I don't really want to put 8 hours into a game before it gets interesting.
That's a fair bit of time.
That's not really what I want to do. Yeah, I want my game to be interesting when I start playing it. Because guess what? It doesn't take 8 hours for Kerbal to be interesting. Just play Kerbal.
Well, and that's fine for certain games to do as well, but they can communicate that early on. And like racing games or Need for Speed used to do this, where they'll give you like a really nice car at the start, and then take it away from you. And that used to always piss me off, and it's kind of annoying, but at the same time, it can give, because all these games kind of have to start off slow to give you that sense of progression. Mm-hmm. But it's nice to give the player a taste of like, hey, this is what's coming up. I know the game's going to start off slow. I know you're not going to feel strong, but at least what you'll be able to do. It gives them that taste, and it gives them something. Okay, well, in a couple hours, I'm going to be strong again, and it's going to be fine. So yeah, like stuff like that can be done.
JRPGs do that a lot too. Where at the very beginning, they'll give you this like glimpse of the future or playing the hero of the past or something like that, where you've got all these abilities and you just wreck house, and then all of a sudden the real story starts and you get your real character, and he's just some kid that's now got to build up to that legend. Yeah, because if you're going to start slow, you still have to at least, entice them. You have to give them some reason to put in the hours to do it, They don't want to trust it, because for all you know, that could just be the game, and then someone keeps playing for more, expecting it to get better. They're going to get real salty. So I think the characters are an okay, but I really want to give them a good. Yeah, the only reason I wouldn't be able to give them a good is because I just don't know that much about them. They're hilarious, but they're not really that distinguishable of characters. Yeah. There is not a lot of character there, but we love the personality that is given off by them. Not a character game, but they are very enjoyable characters. And it's the kind of thing that happens with co-op games like this too, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like the same thing with like Killing Floor 2 is they'll have a diverse cast and a lot of characters, but the characters themselves are never going to grow because they're not always going to be the same. We're not going to be playing as the same character every session, so you can't have that progression. So you can't have them, have a conflict, have a resolution, have some sort of turning point, and have reflection. It's just not going to happen in those style of games because they're supposed to be short session based. You drop in with a class and you do it, and that's fine. Like, I'm not saying it needs to absolutely have that, but without it, you can still say that is a bit of depth that is lacking. Yeah. There's no chance for character growth, basically. Yeah, and then other than the main cast, there's the director or whoever your boss is there, and that's about it. Storyline, bartender. Is storyline a bad? Because I don't think there is one. It's one of those things where they don't really provide one. It's kind of just your 9 to 5. They don't really give you a full reason to why. There's no other kind of conflict going up. There's no resolution goal in sight. I do know that you unlock different things when you hit level, I think, 25. But I mean, after 25 hours of playing, I'm not there yet myself. Yeah, I'm fine with a bad on storyline. I don't think it takes away from the game because the game's not about the story at all. But there is no storyline there. If you're reading this review and you want a storyline, this is not your game.
Yeah, it's the same thing with Killing Floor 2 is like, sure, there's some lore in the behind the scenes, but you're not going to get it really from playing the game. You're going to get it from reading wikis and stuff like that. There isn't, like I said, there just isn't a story. We can't say, yes, you can play this game for its story, because no, there isn't. There isn't really a beginning, and there isn't really so much of an end, at least in sight from what we've seen. Or if there is, it's kind of just you reset your character and start over again, and a cyclical story isn't really, not really too much of an actual story.
It's got less story than Risk of Rain. So there's that. Risk of Rain, at least there's survivors who have crash landed on a planet and are attempting to escape the planet. This is literally just, hey, you have a job. Go do it.
Which I think they were going for, and then it's okay.
No, they nailed what they were going for, but there's no story there.
Yeah.
Nobody else really played it, so nobody else can tell us how well it runs. How well does Deeprock Galactic run? System requirements, 2.4 gigahertz dual core with 6 gigs of RAM and a GTX 460.
Yeah, GlenCon. It's basically what happens kind of with more the co-op or sandboxy a bit of games or stuff with the merges. The same thing that happened with State of Decay 2 is you kind of have to make those sacrifices to allow that, because otherwise progression gets weird and things can be done out of order, and things get a bit difficult, especially when it's so heavily relied on co-op. That can get really hard to do with progression, because now one person's at one place and one player is another place, and well, now I can't play with my buddy on my end, because if he jumps into my session, I'm going to spoil everything for them, kind of an idea. So it's not like bad doesn't mean like it's like bad and detracting away from the experience entirely. It just kind of means if it's not there, it can be kind of hard to classify. Like maybe we could be like it's okay because it's not there, didn't need it, but it's hard to say this game has an okay story when there isn't one if someone wanted one.
Game physics would probably go under mechanics.
Yeah.
Hey, Nerfum. Welcome. How's your weekend? Do you like digging as a dwarf? Have you played Deeprock? I love it too. Like that's the thing, right? We're giving this game okays and bads, but we love this game. We do. It's just the writing is not why you play it.
Yeah. You're not playing it for the story. You're playing it for the silliness, the charm, the jank, and just the 9 to 5 dwarf life. Yep.
Yep. Rockin' stone. That's all I have to say. Animation, I lean. I mean, they're simple, but I lean toward good. I like it.
Yeah, they're smooth. I'd say they're really
even like throwing the cup and bouncing it off your buddy's head before the mission and stuff. It hits perfectly. It bounces perfectly.
Yeah, well, even like the weapons, the mining, the interaction with stuff is good. What do we think about Hearts of Iron 4? I really, really want to play those games. I have issues focusing and issues with 4X. So they intrigue the hell out of me, and I love watching people play them, but I haven't actually been able to play them myself because I just suck at them. I just can't. I
love 4X. I haven't played Hearts of Iron 4 or Europa Universalis, but I love me some good 4X. Tops of my chart are Master of Orion 2 and Endless Legend. Oh, those are good games. Those are good games. Okay or good. Animations are smooth and mostly give away what is happening. I still can't time the launch cable into slamming the pickaxe in order to get into the wall.
Like with the Scout? I'm a little confused on what that is, at least, but it's... Yeah, I'm trying to think, like, for animation-wise, like, the quality of them is good. I don't really see too much, like, clipping, but or introspective, and that kind of just seems more of, like, a... Like, if you're, like, cabling up to a wall, I usually just cable and then immediately switch to pickaxe, and then it's more of just, like, a personal timing thing. But from what I've seen, things are good. I can't remember the giant robot's name, but that thing's pretty cool. The drill that just doesn't know how to drive.
Yeah, we may have a few things to say when we get to the AI area.
But the enemy animations and stuff like that, they're good and consistent. And they transition well to ragdoll, which is nice. Some games can kind of pop real bad.
We love the graphical style. We love the settings. The caves and the dwarves. Game oozes personality.
I really love the kind of low poly approach, which is,
They did it so
very well done textures and a lot of charm.
Understand Hearts of Iron 4, just start a game. Every time you don't understand something or struggle with something, watch a video on it, you'll get good at the game quick. I mean, that's every game, though. You could, no offense, but you could literally say that about every game.
I do own Hearts of Iron, and I do get it. It's mostly like, for me, it's like I say, it's a personal thing. Like, it's not anything against the game, and I would never expect the game to accommodate me. It's just, like, I have ADHD, which just makes games like that very difficult for me to play. Like, I don't have the focus to think about big picture stuff, and that's kind of like the whole point of the game, is you're supposed to be thinking about big picture stuff and big picture strategies. That's why I say I'm very jealous, and I love watching people play it because it's very intriguing to me, and I do own the game. But that's the issue with me. It's like an actual, it's just, I'm better with like the smaller RTSs, and even then I usually like playing with friends that can help micro and manage things a bit more. I'm one of those ones where if I was to play Hearts of Iron, I'm gonna really be really bad at managing like resources.
Yeah. I don't even know what Noita is, but welcome, Zelo, and I laugh. Musical score in Diggy Dwarves.
I'd probably go with okay. It's got a really interesting tracks in the background. But it's one of the things that there's not too much opportunity for it to be like super great, and I'm probably going to compare it kind of like to Killing Floor as well, where does have action tracks when stuff is going on and like that, but I mean, there's only so much enhancement that really provides, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who do really like the score and would listen to it in their own spare time, but there's nothing here that was like really pushed the bar for me when I was playing. There wasn't anything where when I'm playing the jukebox back at the base, it's like these are fun, silly little tracks, but it's not something when I'm like, damn, or it's not like when we play Risk of Rain 2 when you're just constantly commenting like, wow, this track is just killer. It's amazing. I'm actually just paying attention to what's going on with just the music.
I think I have seen this before. Not really my my style typically, so I overlooked it. Maybe not overlooked it, but didn't look into it too much. Yeah. Decent, but not super memorable because it can't tie into specific events. Yeah. Though you can have just like fantastically awesome music in a roguelite still. It can be a thing. Like, it doesn't have to be tied to memorable events just to have fantastic music, a la Risk of Rain 2.
Yeah, especially if something is heavy and like melodic. If you have a lot of melodic tones, then it'll become super memorable no matter what. It doesn't just have to be atmospheric.
Voice acting is good. I'm not going to listen to any arguments. We love the
Rock and Stone. They sound like dwarves. It's amazing how they actually sound like dwarves.
Rock and Stone. If you don't rock and stone, you ain't coming home. There we go. That sums up the voice acting perfectly. Perfectly. Sound effects.
I'd say good. There's quite a bit to it, and there's not a whole variety of it, but I do like how each creature kind of has its own noise. The drills and stuff are super satisfying. The ships when they land are satisfying, and everything. There's nothing there that detracts in the experience, and I find that a lot of it kind of adds to it. And even like the pumps pumping to just everything that's going on, the different weapons and the sounds they make.
Appropriate. The weapons do not sound anemic. The digging sounds great, and the tunneling robots are also on point. Only mark against the sound is that I can never tell exactly where a drop is coming, and have had multiple ones land on my head because I didn't notice when the folks I used to play with called one down. That's funny. I think that adds to the game. Get dropped on, son. Okay. AI. Pathing.
Everything else is okay except for the frickin' robot, but that only ever happened when I play with you guys.
So we're giving it an okay, or does it get a bad? I guess it's kind of charming.
I mean, it was.
It's okay. I guess
It wasn't like just the one thing's pathing's bad. Everything else is okay. I wouldn't say that completely ruined the experience for me, or it was. I could say it was rarely happening with you guys, and it killed one of our runs. But now that we know it can do it, we adjust. We can just not be completely on the thing and move off of it when it starts doing that. But that was a bit wild. I would go 90 degrees up and then just go another 90 degrees straight down, and it's like, okay, or more like 180 degrees. Just, right, we go all the way up and then we go all the way down. It's like we can't even stand on this thing, so it was a bit janky. But I mean, it's just kind of the charm of it, right? It was fun. We weren't pissed. The nice things about these games is that there's not a lot of punishment since it's more on the casual side, punishment for losing. If it was something like a roguelike where, dying means that you lose your guy and then now you're dying because this thing's pathing weird, then that would be much more offensive. I agree.
Where I basically add is my last line. It adds a bit of lovable jank to the game, but cannot be called good.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like I said, if they went for that kind of more roguelike thing, then they would have to put in the more effort for the AI to ensure that stuff like that doesn't happen. But since it's a casual playthrough, and most people are going to be like, it's more like a roller coaster at that point, so it becomes actually fun. So it's not a.
Just for the record, because of the requirement of us being on it, because it was literally just in the air, like there was not even any earth around it. It was just pathing through the air. We couldn't. If we fell, we died. So we all got an achievement for all of the dwarves staying on the digger for like 3 minutes straight and killing a certain amount of bugs without leaving it. Because if we did break that achievement, we would have just died. So that was the only way to survive, was to get an achievement.
It was like an inch on the side of the cave, and everything else was just free floating in the air. So like. There was nowhere for us. I would have been fine. Scout's fine, but everyone else is in a lot of trouble.
Scout, you're like, I don't know about you. I'm a scout. I'm fine. What's your problem? What are you complaining about, guys?
So it was just nowhere for anyone else to go. It was great.
It was insanity. Accessibility. I was looking up Deeprock Galactic options screen.
It's unfortunately missing a fair bit. It doesn't have controller remapping, which sucks. Or controller sensitivity.
No controller remapping, no CC. Very limited on the accessibility options. If you cannot play the game the way it is, you may be out of luck, and that is super sad because it's a really fun game.
No controller remapping is a really big one.
Yeah.
Especially there's a lot of people who can have to use customized controllers that still show up as a hardware controller, as an Xbox controller or something like that, especially with the ones that Xbox provides. But sometimes they still need to remap buttons for certain things because depending on what the custom hardware is, they have custom needs for it.
Yep.
So if they can't rebind it, it sucks.
I watch a guy once in a while on Twitch called Handy Capable Sean who plays with his chin.
That's great.
He can only use really his mouth and chin stuff. He beat like Castlevania and stuff like that. Like games I can't beat. He beat it with his chin, so that's cool. There's a shout out for him. Check him out. Plays more in the daytime. Yeah, that's bad. That's another bad. Now the mechanics, where the game shines. Let's just put a good and gush on the game because I love this game's mechanics. Yeah. How I love thee, let me count the ways. There you go. That's what I got to say about it. The trinity of classes with a fourth thrown in as just like, here you go, have something that shoots things. I don't know, nobody plays that unless they don't know what they're doing, right? That's the only reason for that one. Otherwise, it's a really nice trinity. It's a really nice set of abilities to work together.
Even the fourth one, it's that it's the utility class, right? Even with the Trinity, there's always a slot for utility. Kind of, especially if you're looking at the D&D side of things, it's like the other spec that like a bard will run, where it's maybe not directly like a healing or anything like that. It's kind of the one that can enhance everyone else up or somehow, you know, provide some sort of assistance, that's not just damage or not just healing. It's for this, it's the scout. You know, the scout can go ahead and scout things for it. It can find where you need to go. It can call things out. It can get up to the hard to reach spots that other people can't really get to. It's that, you know, utility, which is real nice because everyone kind of has their own little job and everyone kind of falls into, which is great.
Yes, we know. We love.
Oh yeah, that's the first thing I started doing was like, oh, these barrels are super jank when you jump on them. All right, we're putting all the barrels in one area and we're gonna see, we'll start seeing what happens. And it's wild, especially when you get like locked to one. You start slamming around everywhere and they just kind of accepted it and called it a feature. You're just
bouncy barrels. Yep, bouncy barrels. Everybody loves bouncy barrels. They ran with it. They just let it break the game and made it a lovable feature of the game, basically.
I have not been able to get on the map, and I have tried very hard, and it's usually something I'm able to do.
I was going to say Pseudo's usually pretty good at getting out of the map too. So if he can't get out of the map, that means it's a pretty well thought out map. There was a lot more effort than some people may consider has gone into that map.
Yeah,
to keep you
even like, you know, even just like the collision detection as well, right? Because for most maps to get out of it, like, it's not always necessarily like always the map. It's just if you know how the collision is being calculated, you just know that you only usually need a couple frames.
You just have to be moving fast enough.
Yeah, and you can get through. If you can get like half your body through, you know, depending on how the game's collision codes are running, it's probably not gonna. It can assume you're probably already on the other side, and it'll bump you over there rather than spitting you back to where you are. And or for a lot of games, you can kind of just get stuck on a wall, which you can see happen a lot of it. You get stuck on the floor, you get stuck in some object, or you'll collide with something wrong.
Oh, breath edge.
That's a good example. Just not you moved into something a little too quick. You are now a part of it. You have morphed into it, and you're playing Jumanji.
Yep. Also depends on certain animations. Destiny 2 has problems with triggering a mantle that causes you to go through the ceiling. Yeah, because collision isn't checked. It just plays animation, and after animation, then it starts checking collision, right? Happens a lot.
Yeah, well, certain animations can have, you know, a moved collision box, and then all of a sudden, like, I can't remember what the game was. It was a really easy way to get on the map because you could interrupt an animation state, and one of the things you could do is basically you would start an animation and move like on a certain spot and then interrupt it, and the collision would jump, and then it would push you through the wall because it was one place and now another one, and it doesn't interpolate between the two. It just moves it there, and then now when it detects collision, you're already like more than halfway through the wall, so it just pushes you through the rest of the wall. Depending on the game, sometimes you can do a lot of physics jank with that too, because you can just like sometimes it'll calculate its movement, and then if you collide with something while transitioning states, it'll be okay, well, what was their position before, what is their position now, and if it's within one frame, the game's going to interpolate that as very fast, so you're going to get a lot of velocity and you're just going to launch.
Love those launch airs, floating points being the classic one. Jump on a narrow object repeatedly.
You find a crack.
Yep.
You do that in Halo Super Bounce. You just find a nice crack and jump and land directly on it, or try to get as much surface as you can to collide with as little points of the other thing as you can, so it just bounces you all on one point and just condenses your velocity and just acceleration. Zoom.
Work very well together, and the goals for the missions require various abilities and can be approached in a multitude of ways depending on what dwarves are with you. It really is very well thought out, the mission goals with the abilities of the dwarves.
I really like how the game is still, you can play it solo. Excuse me, it's an enhanced experience with 4 people, but I do like how with each character you can just play them solo. It's not like certain games where, you know, there's some ones if you're playing as a healer or if you're playing as like a tank, you're just kind of screwed to do a solo run. You're just, you know, you're kind of missing it. And then the damage dealers, you know, can solo no problem because the instances are moved down, where each one of these classes has their, you know, their benefits that can, you know, really shine for solo as well. Still, like Scout is fun as hell solo, zooming around. I can still play Digger because I can dig to where I want to go. Engineer is fine, you just pack up your stuff as you go and kind of move it.
Yep.
Nothing is like, there's no role that can't still be soloed, but even when playing with a team, since there's a lot more enemies, everyone still has those roles, and it still feels like a whole lot of stuff going on, and no one really feels like they're either too overpowered or too underpowered. Everyone kind of feels like they're super strong, which means everyone's kind of balanced nicely.
And they've all got their own strengths and their own weaknesses, and you're never useless. You can always do it. You just might not do it as well. So if you're forced to do it, you can do it. And if you're a team, giving it to somebody else to do is going to be way faster. Depends on the game, but mostly has a large impact on a game. Oh, the movement thing. Yeah. It does it depend on the game, though? How you move, and movement is always important.
Yeah, I mean, some games don't have movement, right? Like I'd say, like, you know, I mean, I guess Civ technically has movement of units, but I'd say it's a lot less important than, you know, Call of Duty. You know,
less important,
like that
less important, but still important to the game. How things are moved around. I mean, even like if you go back to like text games where you've got rooms, moving from room to room is still a movement in the game, and how it is done and how it is implemented is important to the experience of the game.
It's just that level of interaction. It's like any player interaction, you know, it is important. You know, anything that players interact with, anything that player is going to be interacting with, or if it's going to be moving, if they're going to be changing it or anything like that, it needs to, you know, be done well and done good. And for movement, at least, you know, if a game is not smooth or it's jittery, or we talk about control quite a bit too, that it can get real frustrating really quick. And for game devs out there too, it's one of the first things that, you know, people don't really think of or really appreciate too much until they try to make it themselves. That it's very hard. Like if you play Super Meat Boy, like the control for that game is super smooth, and you can try and play, you know, some old NES platformers where, you know, you can't move and jump at the same time, and it's just like, oh god, it's unbearable. It's so frustrating. It just feels so wrong.
And then you have stuff like Hollow Knight, which is just like butter in your hands.
Yeah,
that game is so good. I haven't encountered any bugs. Have you? I mean, we actually just said that you can barely even get out of the maps.
Yeah, there's some physics jank. I think we've had some state issues.
I haven't personally had state issues.
I had a goal that bugged out on me, and I think eventually it corrected itself. But I haven't had anything that it can like jump to my mind being like, this sucked or it broke my game. I think I've just had certain things where some states can get a bit funky, but it also just been me because sometimes when I play games, like I can kind of just start doing random stuff and purposely start breaking games. So I might just be shooting myself in the foot. But as a casual playthrough, I don't think there's anything that's going to be buggy that's going to really, you know, frustrate you too much. You know, what you're going to do is, you know, probably going to happen. I don't think
I'm going to give it a good
to the floor. Yeah.
Like no clipping walls, no falling through floors.
You don't lose inventory. It doesn't disconnect you randomly. It doesn't crash.
No save loss, crash, inventory loss. In all the hours we have yet to encounter any experience breaking bugs. That's good, especially for its scale. It's not a massive AAA game or anything like that. They've polished the hell out of it. I thought I hit a bug or two early in my playtime with Deeprock Galactic, but I don't remember what it was, and I don't think it happened more recently. Actually, I think the bugs were CTD, and it was instability with my graphics card at the time. Yeah, that's not the game's fault at all. Can't fault the game for that one. RNG... Actually, I think it's pretty good. I really like the procedural generation of their cave systems and the layouts of the veins.
Yeah, I love how it feels different, but still the same. You know, it feels like they're like the map feels the same, but like I said, the layout's different, so you don't actually know it. It's not like you're going through the motions. You still got to find everything, but everything is still different enough that it's unique. I like how the missions, you know, you get random ones you get to choose from, and then themselves are going to be different. And a good example is the pipeline ones. You know, sometimes you'll get a spawn where the pipeline is real close and you're like, awesome, but sometimes they're super far away, and now you gotta dig out this huge path for this pipe to go through. And
as a digger, I like it when they're far away. I get to be useful.
And that led for us to some cool stuff where we had this like giant pipeline that just spiraled up through the wall, and we got there, and it wasn't like it was RNG to the point where it was unplayable, where we had to say, oh, I wish I could just reroll. When you're playing things with RNG, the kind of things you want to aim with is, you know, to have the player not aware that there's RNG. It should feel like it's a natural dynamic part of the world. And the other one, if they're aware of the RNG, they shouldn't be at a point where they're wishing they got a different roll. If a player is wishing something else rolled or something they could re-roll, then you're not using RNG appropriately, except for like, I don't know, there's not much excuse for that unless it's like competitive games, but I even say in competitive games there probably shouldn't be RNG.
Yeah, you should have absolutely no RNG in a competitive game, a truly competitive game. That's what turned me right off of Hearthstone. I played it for a little bit at the beginning, and I was like, the only time I lose is when it gives me a shit hand. That's the only thing that kills me, and it just refuses to give me good cards. And no. Yeah. Made me want to throw my phone out the window a couple times too. Damn.
Like, yeah, that's one of those ones where it's really, it has one really like relies on it because they go for that kind of. I think there's a point of it too. Like there's a lot of cards that are like attack something random, and you'll be at a point where you need it. It's a 1 in 3 chance. You need it to kill their like big bad so you can win, and you'll drop it, and it's, you know, you win or you lose. And for a lot of people, that's not great because they want full control of it. And for some other people, no, they really love that kind of gambling aspect of something where you're just going to kind of take a chance, right? You win and you just like, oh, I feel like I got lucky. And some people really enjoy that feeling of getting lucky because
it's very casual though.
Yeah, it wouldn't be repeatable always for competitiveness because it's, you know, what's the nice thing about Magic the Gathering is you can lower as much entropy with the cards as you want, right? You could have a lot of cards in the deck, but there's a lot of stuff in that game that lets you search for what you need and have counters for what you need. Or it can still happen just due to, you know, how decks are, but depending on how strong your deck is, you really minimize that chance to the point where it's almost, you know, non-existent. And a good deck, you know, will actually have a high chance of successfully winning a lot of the time.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize, but high-tier Magic the Gathering decks are all about just lowering the percentage odds of drawing the wrong card. They break it down to the percentages of what's going to be a solution, and that's where it ends up. I used to play with some really high-end Magic the Gathering players and love that game. If you play Magic the Gathering, Glenn, when all of this gets done and people can get together again, you should come try my Power Cube. Sometimes in MTG, you mulligan to 4 before you stop drawing only land, no land hands. Yeah, I usually just shuffle my deck better one real good time. After that, you have a time limit for how long your deck has to be shuffled, but there's no rules other than that. So if I can do it quickly, what I do is, what I'll do is I'll take out all the land real quick and I'll go card, land, card, land, card, land, card, land, card, land, and I'll seed it through and then I'll shuffle. It's randomized, but I'm going to get cards. I'm going to have a playable hand. If I can do that in the legal time limit of the shuffle, then it's legal. Right, so. Word of advice, and good control. Yeah, I love the control.
Yeah, controls very well, especially for Scout. I love the Scout. Zooming around Spider-Man.
Responds very well to interact prompts. Controls very smooth. Always does what I wanted it to do when I told it to. Save for grinding at times can be picky.
Yeah, and I never, like, even just like the aiming and weapons and stuff like that, I felt like I never felt like I was getting frustrated or feel like I'm moving too slow. And as, sorry, I can't remember who was talking about it earlier, but they're saying how a lot of AAA games overlook movement. And it's like, it's such an important thing. Like the moment that you're kind of restricting movement on a player, they'll feel it. And it's one of those things where when you go to implement it yourself, it's so hard to get that feel that, you know, a lot of games have just nailed now and has become the standard. And it actually is a lot of polish and a whole lot of effort and work into it. It's not just something as easy as, you know, the player moves the right stick to the right, so now you just move the camera to the right. You have to, you know, boil down like, okay, well, what's the dead zone of the controller? How much does the controller actually have to move before we say that the camera's moving? Because if you don't have a dead zone, even the controller just shaking is still going to move the right stick slightly, and the camera will start jittering, or even them resting their thumb on there will still jitter it. So you need to have that.
That's
okay. Well, how fast
stick drift is? Yeah, well, it's the sloppiness of your controller getting bigger than the programmed dead zone of the game.
And then as well as, well, how fast does it accelerate? How fast does it actually move? How does it interpolate? You know, what happens if they just, you know, immediately stop, or what if they tap it or stutter? There's a lot of stuff you kind of have to handle and smooth that we kind of just take for granted. It's very hard to it's not impossible to do because like people have kind of figured it out, and especially with game engines, you can kind of load it in. But anyone who's kind of going into game dev for the first time will notice that like the moment you make a platformer, you'll be like, this feels weird. This feels kind of wrong. Everything just jumps too much, or it's instant, and you'll notice that there's a lot of kind of little things, little kind of enhancements that are added, and then a lot of kind of interpolations, a lot of tweening, a lot of kind of springiness that's kind of added to controls that we take for granted. A little bit of weightiness here isn't always a bad thing, but some people go too far. There's too much weight. Well, now things feel heavy or things feel delayed. It's a lot. There
is a lot, an absolute lot that goes into it.
Coyote.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's Mega Manning and Coyote time to consider. So also when to collide with the platform that you're jumping up to. Then most platforms are one-way collision. Do you do one-way collision? Do you do two-way collision? Do you detect collision on the side of the platform? Does that trigger a mantle? And then from there, you have to tween the mantle animation to make sure you're actually grabbing the edge of the platform, and everything has to be aligned. And it's all, millimeter pixel counts of some person testing, tweaking, testing. And it's time, and time is money. It's very expensive to get these games to look right and play right. What's the difference from an edge where you can still jump, but your character is no longer on the ledge called? Coyote time. Okay, I think that's what was already asked when Pseudo was saying it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
it's a reference to
Wile E. Coyote.
And how he would float for a second before falling. And it's
he never falls until he looks down.
Don't look down. But yeah, it's like those little improvements. Another big thing for platforming too is corner to corner hitting. Like depending what your hitbox is, if your hitbox is a corner, if you're jumping up to a platform, if the bottom corner of your hitbox hits the top corner of the other one, technically it's just going to stop you and you'll drop straight flat down, and it's very hard. But if you have it even as a circle or as like a curve, there's a lot of kind of jankiness that can happen when hitting a curve on a sphere. If you hit the top part of the sphere, you're not going to smoothly transition to it too. It's a lot. I recommend for people who are even slightly interested in game dev, if you haven't tried it out, just download a game engine like Unity or Unreal or Godot and just try making a platformer. It'll be a eye-opening experience. You'll have a lot more appreciation for controls.
You don't even have to try making a platformer. All of the major engines, like the big ones that you can just go download and try right now, have lots of tutorials available for them where they try to teach you how to use it. And one of them is always make a little platformer, and they'll walk you right through. Put your platform here, do this, do this, do this. And they'll get you all set up to the point where you can start tweaking and tuning those values. And when you first try to run around in your own platformer, you're going to go, oh, this plays like ass. That was my experience. It was amazing. It was amazing what actually had to go into it. I'm doing the giveaway right now. That's what I'm working on. Yeah, you ramble away.
I'm glad to see that it went good, okay.
Yeah, me too.
I'd say it's a fair assessment. It's not a game. As much as I love the characters, I mean, there's not a whole lot of writing for them. But that's more of a mechanic of that front of you just get to yell rock and stone, and I'm looking forward to discovering more. But I'd say it's a fair assessment.
Yeah, I think generally it's a fantastic game. It's highly polished. Everything's thought out, well scoped, well finished. I can't say any much bad about it other than the characters are pretty thin. Just basically where we're at. We've summarized that. Maybe we should play some Deeprock. Does anybody in chat want to play Deeprock? We talked about doing some more State of Decay 2, which I'm cool with as well, but after reviewing Deeprock...
It's been a bit since we played it.
Yeah.
It's a good time.
And it's just such a good game. Nope. It's so hard to recognize the regulars now. There's a bunch of accounts that just have never been seen in chat, and while I would love to give those people a game, I don't know how to find you. And if you do want to win a game, make sure you join Discord so we can give it to you. You know what? Here, let me help you. There you go. Go jump in, eh? Gotta get down there and just do her, eh? Just send her, buds.
Full send.
Feel like it's praise from a game when you finish reviewing it and react with, I like playing this game. We should play this game after we finish with the review. I agree. That is high praise.
It's a bad time when we finish a review and like, okay, let's not ever talk about this game again.
Like the sequel to Dead Space 2 that never happened.
I don't know what you're talking about.
See? I just mention it and chat just goes silent. Everything just goes silent. Nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to be reminded about Space Country. You didn't like shooting rocks from that cannon? Oh yeah, I forgot about that part. How do you even remember that part? How many times have you played that game to remember stuff from it? You poor thing.
I mean, like there's still all the mechanics are still good. It wasn't like 100% bad. It was just such a jarring change from the second that it was just felt like such a step back. And then it's kind of the problems with sequels is that, you know, there's going to be some expectations already set. And if you take a step back, it just overall makes the experience so much worse because you know what a better game for would be like. And it just makes that experience so much more, you know, much more frustrating.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you could, like I said, the whole time I was playing it, I could say like, oh yeah, this part was made before the step in. This part was made after the step in, because the game just changes back and forth, like 180. Yeah, completely ruined the experience. Though I absolutely loved abusing the roll iframes and animation to get through the smoke room. Everyone was like, oh, this part, and then I was just like spam roll and just rolled through it at full speed without ever losing any health, and everyone was like, you can do that? Yep. Deeprock Galactic is not a game you particularly enjoy, and that's unfortunate, but it is what it is, you know. Yeah. As we always say, not every game is for everyone. Is this updated? Do I need to refresh this? I don't know.
Yeah, that's fine. Like, role-based games aren't always, you know, everyone has their preferences, and it's not, you can't force people to like every single game that's out there. That's the kind of the beauty of it, right? People have, you know, what they like, and there's enough variety out there that, you know, there's it can be such different games from one thing to the next. It'd be a very boring world if, you know, games are only made for the largest kind of scope for the largest fan bases. It's nice that there's things out there for everybody, no matter, you know, how niche.
In fact, I'm often preaching for the exact opposite because of the MMO world, where they are trying to just cater to the largest market, and everyone wants the largest market, and nobody's paying attention to the smaller markets that exist that are highly profitable. And cater to us, please. We need games. We need games. Give us hard MMOs. Give us things we have to work together on.
Yeah, it's one of the first things. MMOs are just so expensive.
I know.
But hopefully as technology develops, maybe it gets a bit more cheaper for like hosting and for content creation. I think the big thing about it too is I don't think there's really an engine out there that you can really use.
Yeah, really it's pretty MMO, much right?
You have to
custom all the way.
That yourself, and that's the engineers you have to hire to build those network stacks and, you know, build those server architectures. Is just, they ain't cheap.
No, they are not.
Then it's not gonna. You're not gonna. If they are cheap, you're gonna have a bad time. So.
Yeah, I am aware. But you don't need to be WoW's size to make profit.
No, but it's hard to get, you know, the budgets for certain things, right? But I think it'll come someday, right? And it's like crowdsourcing is always a thing. It's not impossible. It's just unfortunately super rare. The barrier to entry to that one is hard, and it's been made harder because so many have, you know, aimed too high and have failed.
Yeah, well, like I said, they're trying to be the WoW killer, and you cannot kill what does not live. WoW is the next role-based games are not your cup of tea. It's fair. WoW is the next old school RuneScape.
Yeah. You could say like it's like people are, it'd be like, yeah, it's a good example. People trying to say, well, this is going to kill RuneScape, and it's one of the things where it's just always going to exist. There's always going to be a crowd for it. And
Yep.
There's still enough room in that market for, you know, multiple juggernauts of the thing, right? Like it's and you're not going to be able to just take their share, especially since a lot of people overlook how important community is to those games.
Oh yeah. Yeah, to get a guild to change servers even is damn near impossible. Changing games? No. You lose too many people. I've seen it tried to be done too many times. Now, you may be able to tell I've played a number of MMOs in my time. And as soon as we get some more good ones out, you'll see me play more. I promise you. I promise you. There will be MMOs on this channel as soon as there's MMOs worth playing on this channel.
There's that Amazon-based MMO that's supposed to come out this year, I think, but I have a feeling it's probably going to end up...
No, it's already been canceled.
Canceled. Oh, yeah.
It was canceled a while ago.
No, it's still showing as up for me.
Really?
New World? I don't think New World's been canceled yet.
Thought it was. I'm sure I read a story saying it was.
Oh, there are a bunch of other Amazon games that got canceled, but I don't think New World has.
Yeah, no, I've read one specifically that their MMO was canceled.
I think they had another one that was close to an MMO, but I don't think New World itself has been canceled.
Okay, they had more than one MMO is what it was then. All right, how many games we got left? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All right. Next week will probably be the last time, so we'll do 5 this week and 6 next week. That's it. We've been giving away games for over a year, though. Let that sink in. It's kind of amazing.
God, media is just so good at making games look so much better than they probably are going to be.
Yep.
Looking at the media for this, and I'm like, oh man, I want to try this, but I'm like, these are still pictures. It's going to be a lot different.
Yep.
But we'll see. I mean, even if it's, I don't know, I'm not going to judge it ahead of time. I'm going to hope it's good because I really would love to have, especially now that I'm done school for a while until the fall. Like I've got the time. Where's the MMO that just kills my nights?
Yes. It's still being built. It's called Pantheon.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see what games we're giving away. Yep, this is right. Okay. I've heard a lot of people talk good of this game, and yet I've never played it. But I hear Dragon's Dogma is pretty legit. Pretty legit.
I don't think I've played that either, but I've definitely heard the same as well, that it's really good.
Yeah, a channel with a lot of RPGs that I hang out, they speak highly of it there, and they're rather large RPG fans, so. And for Egg, the Sexy Brutale, I have no idea what that is, but it sounds furry. Nope. Looks strange. Is this? Pretty. Like, really pretty. There's some really nice lighting.
It is very pretty. I like the style of that.
Yeah.
It's good lighting.
Interesting. Looks indie too. Egg likes checking out indie games just like me. I'm sure that one will get looked at. Rivals of Aether for Icy. Ooh. Resident Evil 5 for Rift Kick. That's a good one. Yeah.
Play a co-op, no play it solo. God, it's so frustrating solo.
And for Mr. Grimm, Zombie Army Trilogy. Familiar with that one?
Zombie Army, yeah. Those games are quite fun. It's Sniper Elite, but zombies, I believe. You're just shooting Nazi zombies in the head. And co-op, and 4-player.
Right on. Yeah, it looks fun. I like shooting zombies. And Nazis. Seems like all good to me. So, Pseudo's done school now. Congratulations, Pseudo.
For now, and thank you.
Well,
Glad
yeah.
you survived on this semester.
Done for the moment. So congratulations. Finished your test, which means he actually is able to play some games. So I'm going to eat some food, and then I'm going to poke him, and poke him, and poke him, and poke him, and poke him, to find out what game he wants to play. And then we're probably going to come back and do that.
It'll be a good time. Looking forward to it.
And anybody else who wants to join us, get your games ready. Who knows? I think most of what we play is on Xbox Game Pass, which means like $5 or $6 a month, and you get to play all the games we play. That's insane. Game Pass is kind of amazing. Kind of amazing. And EA Play is on Game Pass too, so you can even play those EA games. I was playing some Command & Conquer Remastered with it.
I think the Battlefield games were part of that too.
Yes, they were. Yep, all the Battlefields are in there. Madden, FIFA, all on PC. I really wish
NHL was on PC.
Yep.
I'd be so happy.
Yeah, I'm looking for the NHL guys in EA. As soon as I find them, I'm going to be like, hey, you should put it on PC, man. I'm just going to message them on Discord every day. Hey, you should put it on PC, man. It'll happen. It'll happen. But until we come back, after we fill our bellies with food, because turns out food is important. And after all this thinking, my belly's reminding me that it is. So until a little bit later, I'm Deus.
And I'm Pseudo.
And may all your shots be headshots.